dance when the spirit says dance. When the spirit says dance, you gotta dance along. You gotta dance when the spirit says dance. 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 You gotta do when the spirit says do. You gotta do when the spirit says do. When the spirit says do, you gotta do. Lord, you gotta do when the spirit says do. 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 Flowing down, down, down to my soul. Come into the healing rivers, rivers of grace. Come into the healing rivers, rivers of grace. Come into the healing rivers, rivers of grace, flowing down, down, down to my soul. Love shines in the healing rivers, rivers of grace. Love shines in the healing rivers, rivers of grace. Love shines in the healing rivers, rivers of grace, flowing down, down, down to my soul. Forgiveness flows in these rivers, rivers of grace. Forgiveness flows in these rivers, rivers of grace. Forgiveness flows in these rivers, rivers of grace, flowing down, down, down to my soul. Come bathe in the healing rivers, rivers of grace. Come bathe in the healing rivers, rivers of grace. Come bathe in the healing rivers, rivers of grace, flowing down, down, down to my soul.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. It certainly has been a busy candidating week around here. I think the church building has seen more activity this week in the last 16 months combined. I hope you've all had an opportunity to join in one or two of the activities leading up to today's service and the special congregational meeting at noon. My name is Jennifer Skingileski, and I will be the worship leader for today's service. We welcome all at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. If you are a new visitor, please email our office manager, Amy Zen, and let us know how you found us. You will find her email in the Zoom chat. Our church website has a great deal of information about the church and our activities. A link to the website has also been added to the chat. And now, please ensure your microphones remain muted and join us for worship.
Good morning. It is so good to be with you on this beautiful morning. Our words for the call to worship are from the poet and teacher Mark Nepo. He writes this: "To journey without being changed is to be a nomad. To change without journeying is to be a chameleon. But to journey and be transformed by the journey is to be a pilgrim." We all start out as pilgrims, he continues, wanting to journey and hoping to be transformed by the journey. But just as it is impossible when listening to an orchestra to hear the whole of the symphony for very long before we're drawn to hear only the piano or the violin, in just this way, our attention to life slips, and we experience people and places without being affected by their wholeness. And sometimes feeling isolated and unsure, we change or hide what lives within in order to please or avoid others. Now, the value of this insight is not to use it to judge or berate ourselves, but to help one another see that integrity is an unending process of letting our inner experience and our outer experience complete each other, in spite of our very human lapses. I understand these things so well, he says, and I will agree with wholeheartedly, and I think you will too. I understand these things so well because I violate them so often. Yet I, as you, consider myself a pilgrim of the deepest kind, journeying beyond any one creed into the compelling, recurring space in which we know the moment and are changed by it. Mysteriously, as elusive as it is, this moment, where the eye is what it sees, where the heart is what it feels, this moment shows us what is real is sacred. And so in that spirit, I say, come into this house, this virtual gathering. Come, whoever you are. Let's sing it together.
Though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, though you've
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worship the lover of evening. Ours is no caravan
If you have a personal chalice or candle nearby, please get ready to light it. We invite you to type into the chat box where your chalice is lit, the street or neighborhood, or what city if you're joining us from outside Boulder County. Now, I'd like to invite Will Kropp to light this morning's chalice. Will?
Hi there and good morning. My name is Will, and starting next month, I will be president-elect. So that's gotten me to do a lot of personal reflection about the last year. Like you, I have somehow made it through this pandemic, at least so far. There wasn't much playfulness to be had in those early days. I stayed at home, mostly with Caitlin and the kids, and saw y'all on Zoom. While physically separated, seeing your faces made me remember how important our covenants are with each other. It was also a lesson to me to remember to appreciate the moment. At the same time, I was part of the search committee. I was a very small part of a group of amazing and talented folks. For me, it was one hell of a tedious process, but I leave it feeling very gratified to have heard your voices, voices that expressed your hopes and dreams for our faith community's future. The one constant thread that I heard was that there will be change. Not sure about you, but I'm not always great with change. And now, like many of you, I am vaccinated, thanks to all those scientists and doctors out there. Getting back to UUCB in person for candidate week has been cathartic. I didn't realize how good it would be to finally see each other in person and to be potentially on the cusp of a new settled ministry, a new shared ministry where we get to write our story together. That gives me hope for whatever the future might hold. I light this chalice for the road we are on, this journey that we share together.
We now invite all those gathered in your various locations to join together in fellowship and community as we all say aloud our congregation's covenant. We gather
in
fellowship,
fellowship,
to speak the truth to each other, to reach out and touch
one another,
to care with each
with
other,
each other,
and
and to seek the truth of time. So be it.
Friends, each of us is here today. Each of us is in this space because we've made the decision not to try and go it alone through this world, but instead, and each in our own and different ways, to entrust our lives into each other's care. Not to believe the old lie that if we just toughen up and man up and gear up, force of will is going to see us through the night. And so in this moment in this service, we tune into those joys and concerns in a deep connection with each other and with all of life. So I invite you to settle your mind and your heart and your body, settle your spirit, and listen. Listen to yourself. Listen to that still small voice. Listen to what's on your mind and in your heart today. And in the quiet of your own thoughts, to lift up all that weighs on you, grief and worry and pain. Whatever that is, let's hold it and each other in silence for a few moments. That's not the whole story, though. Grief and worry and pain. And so I invite you now to hold those you love, acknowledging their painful challenges and suffering, and remembering that you and they are not alone. And I invite you to share your concerns in the chat box. Share those things that weigh on you. And I'll name a few of them as they come. hold close today everyone who's struggling, folks struggling with cancer treatment, with new diagnoses, with the long road and the uncertain road of healing and recovery. And even as we enjoy the glorious weather out here, we remember that this isn't normal, even if it is the new normal. And lift up concern for the health of the planet. We hold close those who have lost the people that they love, Amy Phillips' mom in particular. And we remember that even as the world opens, we're exhausted and overwhelmed in so many ways. For everyone who struggles, we extend our hearts and our thoughts and our compassion, remembering that we are woven together in an inescapable network of mutuality, even if we may forget it or lose that thread. Friends, in this container of love and care and community, I invite you to bring into your heart also those things which you're grateful for, those things that bring you joy. Remembering that joy and woe are woven fine together. I'll invite you to add in to the chat box your joys and your celebrations, those things that you want to lift up in the love of this community this week. Like finding hugs for the first time in a long time, celebrating Pride Month, and for all the folks out there who make UUCB a welcoming place for LGBTQ folks, and for all those folks out there struggling and needing love. Gratitude to see each other, to meet new grandsons, to get to see parents for the first time in years. For the gardens that are exploding out there in flowers and birds and life. For the pets and the kids that we've become closer with. And for the remarkable work of your search committee. This is not the end of our worries and fears, and this is not the end of our gratitudes and our joys. We celebrate, even as we mourn, and we hold those two things together. For all these blessings and concerns, as well as those that remain silently on our hearts, we hold this compassionate space with love. And we remember that each of us bless each other. Amen. Friends, will you join me in an attitude of prayer? I like that line, an attitude of prayer, because it's a reminder that prayer and meditation and intention is not like a transaction as much as it is a mode or a way of being, a kind of listening and paying attention. So will you join me in an attitude of prayer and contemplation, however you understand that? And let's begin all by taking a breath together as one, a long, slow, one of those 5-count breaths. We're going to do that again. And this time, if you have like a sigh inside yourself that needs to come out this morning, I encourage you to let it out as loudly as your neighbors will tolerate. Let's do this again, breathing in and sighing out. Spirit of life and love, known by many names and understood in many ways. Disappointed and despairing and disconnected, this is us. And hurt by the insults of the world and hurt by addiction and mental illness, this is us. And hurt by violence, and violence which has touched the people we love right here in this community. This is us, a hurting people. And it's not the whole story. No one of us is our worst day. No one of us is defined by when we failed to act. No one of us is defined by our wounds as if that's all we are. We hope and pray to remember that we're each of us held in a larger body, loves people, which we make real to each other. Our prayer, our hope this morning is to be the people we're called to become, to let the better angels of our nature shine through out into the world. Our hope, our prayer is that our words match our wants and our action meets our aspirations, that our wounds in an alchemy of the heart are transformed into scars and wisdom. We hope and we pray this morning to turn aside from anger and from hate, even of those we call our enemies, to let go of delicious, rotten self-righteousness, that we stagger not in the storm of the world, but go steady on our way, whatever the weather. Clear mind, open, broken hearts, and hands ready to serve. Amen.
Our reading today is this short poem from Maya Angelou. Lying, thinking last night, how to find my soul a home where water is not thirsty and bread loaf is not stone. I came up with one thing, and I don't believe I'm wrong, that nobody, but nobody, can make it out here alone.
I have this week a sermon a little bit longer than last week. So we're gonna pause and take a break after like the first 45 minutes or so, and then we'll pick it back up again. It's a joke. It's hard to gauge humor by Zoom. The Sandhill cranes, I was reminded on this stole from my internship congregation, the Sandhill cranes, which migrate north for the summer, that flew over you here in Colorado, head out on across this prairie ocean, which starts at our doorstep here and spreads east and north 1,000 miles, all the way and beyond a little town of Hanska, Minnesota, population 402, out among the farms far from Minneapolis. And there in Hanska, the Nora Free Christian Church, this little white church, sits on top of a little hill in a flat land, surrounded on all sides by corn and soybeans all the way clear to the horizon. And beyond that building is the church graveyard with maybe 100 headstones, smooth, polished, dark granite, and old pitted white marble. 1881 was the oldest I found. 2008 was the most recent when I was there a decade ago, driving far from the Twin Cities to preach with them one Sunday. It was a wild feeling place that spring. There's a rawness out there. It was a little above freezing, and the church's wind turbine, this little wind turbine that sat up above them, was spinning too fast even to see the blades. The solitude was immense. I was there early, and no living thing moved in this gray morning landscape. No person or animal or bird, none but me and the gravestones and this old Unitarian church and the sound of breath carried away on the wind. The church was founded, Nora Free Christian Church, in 1881, when the local Norwegian Lutheran Church refused to open its graveyard to those who would not wholly and completely profess its faith, a major thing in a community of Norwegian immigrants. This decision that you couldn't be buried alongside your parents and your children, your friends and your family, because you didn't believe well enough. So they affiliated with the American Unitarian Association, as it was called then, and they named themselves Nora, Norwegian Free Christian Church, free, that is, from an authority that told them what to believe and how to worship. It was a bitter split then. Families split, friends split when those churches split. And that's not just a historical reality. Some of you in this congregation have families who've severed ties or grown distant over theology. And yet, over the years on this little hilltop, the church thrived. They thrived. They founded the first secular community center in the town. They founded the town library. I saw an old photo of all the members and families of this little church a century ago. They're spread out across the lawn in front of it, 200 probably. What kept that church together, what animated it, and what they followed was the sacred promises they had made to each other and to themselves, covenant. First, they said, I am committing to live my life in the integrity of what I believe. One at a time. Some of them after many years, and some of them right away early on said, I am unwilling to speak words, to give support, my time and talent and treasure to something I don't believe in, to something that excludes my fellows. I am unwilling to attend a church that says not all are worthy, because all are worthy. And for many of those churchgoers out on the prairie, watching the Sandhill migration 100 years ago, like many of us, that sense may have come early in their life. Or like So many of us, it may have been a long lifetime of passing before they could speak out loud the doubts and the hopes they'd held for decades. What bound that church together was the promise of each person to themselves and to the holy as they understood it, the promise to live an undivided life. They would bind themselves to witness the births and bury their dead, to turn week after week again toward that thread that we try to follow through life, and do it with full integrity of heart and mind and soul, a Unitarian trinity of compassion and intellect and deep self, the promise of an undivided life. That is not an easy thing. It's very easy to tell this story as if it was so like heroic and natural and straightforward, like of course we do this. But it would have been way easier for those early members of the Nora Church not to speak out, not to demand a parish of inclusion. It would have been simpler, maybe. Certainly it would have engendered less conflict for them to look the other way when their friend or loved one couldn't be buried in their local church's graveyard. But they, each of them, came to believe that the price they would pay, which was real, for living with integrity was worth it. They would lose friends, lose business, lose family. There was a cost to living undivided, but they were willing to pay it. And you know what that means right here in this church. Through this candidating week with you, folks have asked me, why do I want to come here and serve with you? And in part, it's because you know what it is to follow your mission, even when it asks you to pay a price for it. You know what it is to prioritize the life you're called into as a community over your comfort and conformity. When you voted with thoughtfulness and care to become a sanctuary congregation, when you made this commitment, not knowing what the end point would be, how long the road would be, what it would demand from you, nonetheless, you made this commitment, knowing there would be costs that come with it, financial costs, volunteer costs, logistical costs. You said, this is worth it because this is who we are. When you moved to 2 services, some of you have heard me through the week share these examples. There were costs to that. But you knew that the only way to keep this church is to give it away to the people who are walking through the door. And that's difficult and beautiful. And the reason that you can sing "Come, Come, Whoever You Are" and actually mean it. The film critic Roger Ebert said, it's not what a movie is about, it's how it's about it. And just as you've spent this week trying to figure out what I'm about and how I'm about it, I've been doing the same with you. And I see a community that works together and gardens together, that sings together and laughs together and breaks bread together. I mean, this doesn't mean everyone is friends with everybody all the time. Like, conflict is normal, we're still people. But that's the kind of community, you are the kind of community I want to serve with and I want to create with. A friend of mine shared once that a marriage counselor who works with couples contemplating divorce said, people tend to think about this question as, do I stay or do I go? But this therapist said, that's not really the question that's at stake there. The actual underlying question is, can I bring my full self to this relationship? Do I trust my partner to bring their full self to the relationship? That's the question that newcomers are asking when new folks come through our doors every single week here. It's the question everybody's asking. Can I bring my whole self to church? And we gather in this house. You've worked so hard as a community, because I see you wanting that to be true in practice, not in theory, in practice. And then, of course, we continually screw it up, right? Because we're human beings and we lose the thread and find it again or get called back in and keep working to make it real. Of course, we don't do community perfectly, but we're not called to be perfect. We're called to be people among people. The poet says, lying, thinking last night, how to find my soul a home where water's not thirsty and a bread loaf's not stone. I came up with one thing, and I don't believe I'm wrong, that nobody can make it out here alone. We gathered last night for a picnic outside at the building with blankets spread on the ground, camp chairs, and a couple of big canopies to keep the sun off the picnic tables. And you welcomed me in with the same sort of generous welcome I think you'll give any person who walks through our doors. I was so struck. You know, the little things stick with you. I sat down at one table and someone getting up to get a drink said, "Hey, can I get you something to drink?" That's so simple as to be invisible and unnoticed, but that's hospitality. That's care. Gathering for the first time in a long time, I saw friends who hadn't hugged in a year and a half. I saw people sizing each other up because we're used to two-dimensional 1-inch squares. This feels a little more real, someone told me last night. Not, they hasten to say, that online church wasn't, it just felt more solid, more substantial to be together. Dry and hot and golden in the setting sun, that picnic felt a little like how I'd started the day up at the community garden that the Longmont UU Presence tends. It was like last night at the picnic, I was watching these roots of community slowly pushing down into the soil, leaves of relationship opening up a little wider. That stuff moves too slowly to see. You have to trust that it's happening. What I hope for this congregation and see you hungry for is not merely survival, nor even merely growth, but flourishing. Flourishing. Friends, your most important story as a congregation is not that you were deeply wounded by a minister a generation ago. That story is that you were wounded and took the work of healing seriously enough to do it and to keep doing it. And there's a scar, but a scar is the sign of a body healing. A scar is wisdom, not blemish. Your most important story as a congregation is still ahead. And like Will said in the chalice lighting, we get to write this story together. The work ahead as a congregation is the difficult and complicated work of flourishing. It's not automatic or easy or even straightforward or clear. But we do this work in the most difficult times with the least obvious answers to the most difficult questions we have by remembering the best of who we are and what we're about. 3 weeks before hiring me as their minister, Beverly Unitarian Church in Chicago learned that their 140-year-old building was crumbling from the inside. And without a repair project, it's something like 5 times the cost of their annual budget. It was going to come down around them. They didn't have any sewer problems. The sewers were fine there, but the building was going to collapse. And to their great credit and wisdom, They did not come to their minister and say, solve this for us. My masonry skills are really limited also. But they didn't look to me to solve it because it was a challenge that could only be faced in common by the whole community. And so I accompanied them in discernment. I listened in small groups and one-on-one conversation to those members who shared their love for the building and those members who shared their loathing for the building. Gave a steady, good word of calm to the few who worried this would be the end of the congregation, and I named the different outcomes that were ahead for them: staying or going, restoring, trying, failing, reminding and lifting up that change means loss, but it doesn't mean the end. And as the capital campaign started, as they decided to stay, I preached and reported and reminded that no matter the building, the real foundation of a congregation is the people, and its cornerstones are the care and support and shared mission. If the building burns down tomorrow, the folks who show up and stare at the smoldering rubble and try and figure out what to do next, that's where the church is. Here, just like there. And like you, they already knew this was true. They needed a reminder, not a debate. They made the decision to stay, and I stepped back from the operations and logistics to give space for that lay team to lead the fundraising and restoration. My work as a minister, as your minister, isn't to have all the answers and do all the things. Gardener doesn't make the plants grow. But as best they can, they remove the things that keep the sprouts from flourishing. And no serious farmer tries to do it alone for very long and very much land. I don't come to this congregation with a list of policy and program objectives that will transform the place by force of my will. And I don't come to you planning to write this story ahead of us by myself. When the last of the scaffolding came down around Beverly Unitarian Church in October of this church year, that building looked out on the neighborhood solid and secure and restored for the next century. And through stages of shock and surprise, through discernment, through the decision and commitment to stay, through the fundraising, through the construction, through the contracts with the contractors, the most important thing that happened was their clear-eyed focus on their mission and substance as a congregation. And they, like you, were a group of people who could do difficult things, like the Nora Church too, and come out stronger as a community on the far side. They, like you, like the Nora Church in 1881, like countless other Unitarian congregations and those of our friends and siblings, they found commitment more important than clubby comfort, even while they celebrated together and ate and sang and worked and mourned and worshiped and blessed the kids and buried their dead. To journey and to be transformed by the journey is to be a pilgrim. Not the belt buckle on the hat kind, but the real kind. That's what we're all here for, I think, in the complexity and the loss and the beauty of it. The poet Tony Hoagland writes this called Voyage, and we'll close with it. This poem, Voyage, which is both our individual stories and our story as a church community, which I hear as a story of all of life and a story of this last difficult, brutal pandemic year. He writes this, he says, I feel as if we opened a book about great ocean voyages and found ourselves on a great ocean voyage, sailing through December around the Horn of Christmas and into the January sea, sailing on and on in a novel without a moral, but one in which all the characters who died in the middle chapters make the sunsets near the book's end more beautiful. Someone is spreading a map upon a table, and someone is hanging a lantern from the stern. And someone else says, "I'm only sorry that I forgot my blue parka. It's turning cold." Sunsets, like a burning wagon train. Sunrise, like a dish of cantaloupe. Clouds like two armies clashing in the sky. Icebergs and tropical storms. That's the kind of thing that happens on our ocean voyage. And in one of the chapters, I was blinded by love. And in another, anger made us sick like swallowed glass. And I lay in my bunk and slept for so long that all the while I forgot the ocean was going by right there under my window. And the sides of the ship were as green as money, and water made a sound like memory when we sailed. Then it was summer, under the constellation of the swan, under the constellation of the horse. At night, we consoled ourselves by discussing the meaning of homesickness. But there was no home to go back to. There was no getting around the ocean. We had to go on finding out the story by pushing into it. The book was no longer a book. The sea was no longer a metaphor. That was the plot. That was our marvelous punishment. Friends, may we go on finding out our story together by pushing into it among all the difficult and beautiful work of pilgrim living, journey, and transformation. This is who we are. Amen.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
For the month of June, 100% of the contributions to our offering plate will be used to fund UUCB's programs and operating costs. As you probably know, June is the end of the church year. As a result, any contributions made through the offering will help us to close out the financial part of the year on a strong note and give us a springboard into the new year. You can make a donation now using the link posted in our chat, by sending a check to UUCB, or by scanning the QR code on the next slide with your mobile phone. Please be as generous as you can. We will now receive the offering. May our gifts be used to enact justice, bringing peace and love to the Boulder community. And now, we're going to do something a little different for our closing song. We will be singing Blue Boat Home, and you'll find the lyrics in the Zoom chat instead of on the full screen. After you open the chat, I will invite you all to switch to gallery view in Zoom. That way we can see each other and be together as we close the service in song.
Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep. see before me, sing the sky my sailor song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue old home.
Our closing words are adapted from Katie Gelfland, called "The End is the Beginning." We called forth the life of our faith by igniting our chalice all through the week. And at the beginning of this service and across years and generations, the spark of new beginnings invites us into a sacred space to reflect where we've been, where we're going. This particular flame intentionally ends now with our ritual extinguishing, but we fear not its end. For we know with brave hearts and curious minds that from every ending of our life, we are sent forth to make a new beginning. May it be so, and amen.
Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way. Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way.
We invite you to stay with us in our Zoom rooms for a time of online fellowship and discussion. Barb and Fred will join us to tell you how this is going to work. But I will mention now, because of the special congregational meeting at noon, we will only have one round of discussion rooms. We have to close everything down by 11:40 so that we can be ready to start again at noon. We'll close the Zoom meeting right then, take a brief break, and hope everyone will rejoin us shortly before 12 o'clock so we can start the meeting on time. Barb and Fred?
I'm Barb Richards.
I'm Fred Cole.
Reverend Schwartz, thank you for bringing yourself to us. Safe travels going back to home.
Absolutely. And as we join for this abbreviated chat session today, it's the usual pattern. We'll break into smaller groups. You will be invited to join them. And I would make one additional request. Please don't try to sign right back in after you've left, because our wonderful Zoom hosts and AV gurus need the break too, okay? So anyway, enjoy our chance to be together here this morning, just as we enjoyed the chance to be together last night at the picnic. Here comes your invitation.
He knows it.
Hello, George. I don't believe I know you. I'm Mary. Oh, you're muted. You're muted. I don't hear you.
I said, the reason you think you don't know me is because I'm married to Mary Clough, who's well known.
Ah, yes, no, I know Mary. Well, I know her. Yeah, for sure. Okay.
That's usually how I introduce myself to people who
I'm
don't know me.
Right. Yeah. Well, nice to meet you.
We've met before, but yeah,
Sorry.
you too, Mary.
Yeah.
I think the meeting's about to end, and I'll see you when we all vote.
Yep. Bye, everybody.